Hey guys, I'm Jessie, and today we're going to talk about my favorite books of 2022. I know this is a little late, just like my worst books is going to be a little late, but it's okay, because we're getting caught up on everything that we have to film. After my break, I just didn't film, and I want to do all the end of the year videos, so we're doing it at the end of January, beginning of February. It's just how we roll over here. So I read a lot of books that I really enjoyed this year. My whole thing about that is I DNF'd a lot. And because I DNF'd so many books, I was able to focus on reading books that I absolutely loved. Because I wasn't going to finish what I wasn't feeling. And because of that, I didn't have a lot of really bad books. I had a lot of great 4 and 5 stars. And I also had, some 3-star books, but everything was really good. So I'm really excited. I had to really search through and be like, okay, which ones were the ones that stood out the most to me? And those are the ones that we are going to talk about today. The first one is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. And it's funny because another one of Margaret Owen's books is actually on my DNFs list. So that kind of goes to show you that you should give authors more than one try, right? If I would have just read the one book, DNF'd it, and been never reading this author again, I would have never experienced Little Thieves for the beauty that it is. This is currently a standalone, but I believe that there is a sequel coming out. So again, I'm so excited. This is the Illumicreate version. It's absolutely gorgeous. This is I believe it's the Goose Girl retelling, and we are following our main character, and she is a maid. She's poor, but she ends up stealing this pearl necklace of the princess that she is best friends with, and also her maid, assuming this princess's identity, and she goes around stealing from people and then pretending to be this princess when she's not. But now that this prince from another kingdom is back, she's actually supposed to be marrying this dude, and she doesn't want to because he's a jerk. And there's all these break-ins, right, and of the nobility, and they don't know why. They haven't caught the person. So the local police call in reinforcements, and this other basically police officer comes in to investigate. And while he's investigating, he obviously hones in on her, and her story starts to unravel. It is so good. And she is also cursed, and she is the adopted daughter of Fate and Fortune. I know there's a lot going on, and I'm explaining it poorly. But she's the adopted daughter of Fate and Fortune, and basically she was raised by them because her mother gave her away, in the woods one night because she had too many kids. So she was raised by them, and when you're raised by Fate and Fortune, things are expected of you, basically, and she doesn't want to be under either one of them's, care when she's, an adult. She doesn't want to basically be forced to work for one of her mothers. Her whole thing is she wants them to just love her for her and not because she has, this bond with them that she owes them. And it ends up being really sweet between the three of them. And then with this princess that she stole from, can't prove that she's the real princess. It's so good. And there's a romance that I absolutely loved in it. This was it was fantastic. And I had a fun time. The next of my favorites is actually a self-published book. And I don't have a physical copy, but I need to get one. And that is Dragon Mage by M.L. Spencer. This was so good. I absolutely loved it. And I believe there is a sequel coming out soon. It was supposed to come out in 2022, but then it was pushed back, and we don't have a release date yet, which made me sad. We follow our main character, Aram, and he is an autistic boy. And for one, he's written very well, very carefully, and with a lot of respect. And I absolutely love him. He's not a caricature of what autism is. And I thought that was really well done. So we follow him and his friend, and they are kind of like taken on as apprentices for this bard. But before they can like venture out of their village, it's attacked, and they're taken by like the royal guard. So basically, he has like magical abilities, and people with magical abilities are supposed to be like given away, but he didn't know he had these powers. And his friend Marcus actually has his own set of abilities. So they're being taken to the capital to be like drained and used as a source of magic for other people, and his friend Marcus to train as a guard because he has like very specific abilities. So we kind of follow them, and we follow them over a very long period of time, and there is a time jump in this book. So they start out, I think they're like 12, and then we jump like 7 years in the future, and it's so good. I cannot tell you very much because it kind of ruins the first half of the book, but just know that there is a friendship, there is a really sweet romance, and there are dragons, and there are dragon riders, and there is revolution and an evil government, and there's everything I love, and it is so good. If you want to pick it up, I highly recommend it. Hopefully we'll be getting the sequel soon because it was fantastic. My next favorite book of 2022 is actually the first book I read and finished in 2022, and that is A Rhythm of War by good old Brandon Sanderson. Are we surprised? Would it be one of my videos if we didn't like have a Brandon Sanderson on the favorites? Like, probably not. I know this one actually kind of got mixed reviews even from like the typical fan base, but I absolutely loved it. This was Navani's book, and we got Navani, and I love her. It was just really good. It developed on the characters really well, and yes, it's long, and yes, there's a lot packed into it. I really like the Cosmere connections that you really start to see in this one. Like, the Cosmere connections in Stormlight really make themselves apparent in this book. Like, I feel like all of Sanderson's, like, more recent books are just really hammering it home because finally he's coming out with, like, the big Cosmere connections, not just little Easter eggs. So I really love that aspect. And it's like we got more Kaladin, and we got heartbreaking moments, and we got, like, rooting moments, and there was just so much that I loved. And honestly, I started to not hate Adolin in this book, which is wild because I don't like Adolin. It took me until Rhythm of War to not hate Adolin. But I will say I am no longer an Adolin hater. I didn't like him in the first two books, and the third one he was kind of obnoxious. Didn't hate him in this book, so he has grown on me. Like a fungus on the walls. He has grown on me, and I couldn't help it. He's still my least favorite, but I loved it, and I love the Cosmere connections. Obviously, there's not too much I can say because it's like the fourth book in a series. But after the end of this, I am both excited and terrified for the next one. My next favorite book is Babble by R.F. Kuang. And I know some of my friends absolutely hated this. Sorry, Roger. Sorry, Leanna. I really enjoyed this one. We can still be friends. This is the Illumicrate edition. I also have the Fairy Loot one, but it's so pretty. I actually did a full review for this, I believe I can link for you, but basically this is a standalone fantasy by R.F. Kuang about kids at Oxford in the translation department who are all very different and thrown together, and they're from different parts of the world, and translation is magic in this world. So you have to write the translations on like bricks of silver to like make things work. So it's not super fantastical. It definitely focuses a lot more on colonization and racism and bigotry and power dynamics. And then we've got like friendship, and there is no romance, which I kind of liked. I appreciated that there's no romance in this book. Either way, I really enjoyed it. Some people said it's like reading a textbook, and I don't fully disagree with them, but I was so interested in it that I didn't care, and I enjoyed it. One of my other favorite books this year, which may be a top contender for like an all-time favorite, is Middlegame by Shonda Maguire. I finally read Middlegame, and I fell in love with Roger and Dodger. This book was so weird and so confusing and so good. We're following these twins, Roger and Dodger, and they are basically created in a lab, separated at birth, raised by different people, but they have this like psychic connection almost. And what they are is they were made by an alchemist in order to embody language and math. And another thing I love is that our girl, Dodger, is actually the personification of math, which I feel like is really cool because you would think that that would be the boy, just based on typical, stereotypical stuff. But nope, they flipped it, and I love that. But we're kind of following them as they try to connect, and then they disconnect, and then they reconnect. And we're following them through their whole lives. I mean, children to 30s, this book spans. And it is just glorious. And you're best going in knowing not much. So if you haven't read it, read it. The last two of my favorites for the year are actually sequels. So if you haven't read the first books, then you should. But the first one is Fury Song by Rosario Munda. This is the third and final book in the Aurelian cycle, the first one being Fireborn. Y'all, I've loved every book in this series. I gave every book 5 stars, all 3 of them. But this one, just the ending, she nails the ending. It is a bittersweet ending, and it was very, very well done. It wrapped up all the loose ends that I wanted. And it was, like I said, bittersweet. Like, it was happy enough and sad enough. And it, it's like it wasn't everything's wrapped up in a pretty little bow. But it ends the series in the way it should have been ended. And I loved it. This is a series that follows these kids, Lee and Annie, and they are dragon riders, and they're competing to be like basically the general in their dragon rider army. Lee is from the ruling family, and his whole family was killed in the first book. And he was kind of let to live, and so he grows up in an orphanage with nobody knowing who he really is. Very Anastasia retelling. Annie, her family was killed by his family, but they grew up together in the orphanage, not knowing who one another was. So good. So many moments in this book that made me cry. And y'all know if I cry, it's probably going to get 5 stars. Just, this whole series was fantastic. So definitely pick this one. All right. And the final book we're going to talk about is The Bone Shard Emperor. This is the sequel to The Bone Shard Daughter, and I believe it's the Drowning Empire series. Y'all, this was a great second book. It did not have that second book syndrome. It really continued on the story and paced it up. I had so much fun getting back with our characters in this book. And as our characters kind of start to come together. So in the first book, it's very much like the characters are all kind of over the place. And in this book, they're really kind of coming together. And I love seeing that. There is also a romance in this book, which there's not in the first one. But it is so minimal and that it doesn't really affect the story too terribly much. Well, there is a romance in the first book, but again, it's also like very minimal, but it's not between the same 2 characters. It's a different set of characters. You would have to read the first book. If you know, you know. But there's a different romance in this book. Obviously, the one from the first book is still ongoing, but it's so minimal, right? Like, obviously, the romance is not the plot of this story. But it's so good. We get so much plot advancement. We get to follow Lynn, and I absolutely love her, as she finds out more about herself and her family and who she really is and what she can really do and what the world is like and what her new position in life entails and the struggles of that and the hardships of that. And we have more Muffy. And we have a second one. We have 2 talking animal companions. Need I say more? All right. Well, those were some of my favorite books that I read over the course of 2022. I would love to know what you thought about some of these books if you've read them. And I also want to know what some of your favorite books were of the past year. All right. Well, thank you guys for hanging out with me. My name is Jessie, and I will talk to you next time. Bye.